All right, everybody, what is going on? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well today, and it's time to wrap it up. Time to wrap up our little video series counting down the, in my opinion, most valuable members of the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. Started at 12. Now we're down to 1. We got one player left. You guys all know who it is, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And then we're going to be moving on to other things to talk about. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. And yeah, if you watch the 2025 Seattle Seahawks, you might come to the conclusion that the defense deserved more credit for winning the Super Bowl than the offense. And I think you'd be right. That doesn't change the fact there was one player for this Seahawks team that went above and beyond in a way that this franchise has never really seen before, I would say, at least at the position that he was at. And he did things that defy expectation. Like I talked about how Byron Murphy did things that defied expectation the other day. Well, this guy, maybe even more so, did things that just should never happen. I'm talking about Jaxon Smith-Njigba, or JSN. This was an inhumanly good year, and we didn't totally know what we were going to get this year from JSN. We knew he was good because he had a good 2024 season. We also wondered if he would be good now that he would have to play on the outside more, now that he was going to be the number one receiver, now that he was going to be the primary target and ultimately become the guy who gets more targets than anybody else by a long shot. His number two receiver when the season started was Cooper Kupp, who had had 3 fairly forgettable seasons in a row. His number 3 was probably Torrey Horton, who was a rookie. He had A.J. Barner, who had done some decent things as a rookie the previous year, but it was the JSN show, and I mean that in more ways than one. Like, it was the JSN show in theory, and it was also the JSN show in practice, because he went and had the greatest year any receiver has had in the history of this franchise. And he was the best receiver in the league. He won the receiving title, had almost 1,800 yards, and also threw in about 36 rushing yards as well. So you combine it all together from scrimmage, you're talking about over 1,800 yards, 10 touchdowns. And this is the kind of stuff that we thought at one point that DK Metcalf would get to the point where he'd be putting up numbers like this. Didn't happen. JSN, it happened in his 3rd year. He should be nowhere near his prime yet, and here he is putting up almost 1,800 yards in a season. So you have that at play. And by the way, I know his postseason was, by his standard, a little bit quiet, but he still had that monster game against the Rams, and realistically, that Rams game was the real Super Bowl. So even though he didn't do much in the actual Super Bowl, the meaningful Super Bowl was money. So we'll definitely give him some love for showing up when we needed it the most. But you go down the list here. Pro Football Focus graded him incredibly high. They gave him the 2nd highest grade of any receiver in football and the 2nd highest receiving grade. So Pro Football Focus digs him a lot as well. And it goes beyond just the raw grade, although this is certainly worth celebrating here, especially keeping in mind, and we'll come back to this later, the kind of offense the Seahawks run. The way in which the Seahawks conduct themselves on offense, and yet you have all this stuff happening. It's pretty otherworldly. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. If you like sports, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using the Prize Picks app, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, and obviously we are now firmly into the NFL offseason, so we're all about baseball, we got some basketball, we got some hockey, whatever it is you like, Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. Definitely make sure to use the promo code HMA. Prize Picks is hooking up users with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you use that promo code, that is HMA. I've had a great time on Prize Picks so far, so definitely get on over to it, check it out, and make sure to get your lineups. And don't forget about Team Picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So download the app now, use HMA, and get on over to Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. But let's look at another piece of it as well from Pro Football Focus. In 2025, JSN took almost 74% of his snaps as a wide receiver. He was only in the slot about 24% of the time. That's a lower percentage than a lot of very well-known receivers in this league, like Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb. So he was a true blue outside receiver in 2025. And credit to Clint Kubiak for coming up with some creative formations and creative schemes to allow him to kind of walk the line a little bit to where he wasn't a complete outside receiver the way that a Jamar Chase is or a Justin Jefferson. But still, you have to say that JSN, there's no caveats here. Yeah, it's easier to play from the slot than it is to play wide, but JSN played wide most of the time here, a pretty significant majority of the time. So there's nothing there. And then you have his array of impact. If you take a look at the chart on Pro Football Focus, he's impacting the game at every level. Look at how highly he's graded in every single quadrant, except for the quadrants behind the line of scrimmage. Every quadrant past the line of scrimmage is at least an 89.7. And even behind the line of scrimmage, he's still doing fine to the left and the right. It's just this short middle or behind the line of scrimmage, short middle area, which, I mean, he's a wide receiver. How much are you really going to get targeted in that part of the field anyway? So it's not like that's something that should really impact our view of him, but look at the numbers he's putting up in every single quadrant. And by the way, I couldn't find the chart, but I've talked about it before. JSN runs pretty much all the routes. Like, if you look at the charts, you look at the numbers, JSN led the league in receiving yards, and he did not lead the league in yards on a single route type. The only way that's possible is if you are productively running all the routes in the book pretty much, because it means you're not just spamming the same route over and over. You're not just spamming the slant, spamming the go, spamming the comebacker, or whatever have you. Sorry about that. But yeah, he's doing everything out there. He was a deep threat, he was an intermediate threat, he was a yak threat. He gave you a little bit of everything in 2025. And that was not necessarily the book on him when he came out of college. When he came out of college, he looked like he was a guy who was going to be the best slot receiver in football at some point, but mostly he was going to be a slot receiver. He didn't look like he had tremendous downfield speed. It didn't look like he had the strength and ability to beat the jam that would be needed to play on the outside. And so far, I mean, this is granted the first year he's done this, but he did it about as flawlessly as you could hope. And I don't think you could make a very strong argument for anybody else on this team for being the number one MVP, especially when you consider the fact that this Seahawks team doesn't even throw the ball very much. The Seattle Seahawks threw the ball in the regular season last year 481 times. There were only 3 teams in the NFL that threw it fewer: Ravens, Commanders, and Dolphins. So they did not throw the ball that much, and JSN still led the league in receiving yards and was among the league leaders in catches. By the way, even if you want to reduce to just completions, Seattle is still in the bottom 10. They don't throw the ball that much. A receiver for the Seahawks should not be putting up those kind of numbers. So that's the part that makes this almost unfathomable. By the time you got to the midpoint of the season, everybody knew who was going to get the ball, right? Because if you want to take a look at his season per game, and let me pull that up real quick here. Like, pretty much every game he's putting up numbers, right? Pretty much every game until you get to the Minnesota game in week 13, he's giving you at least about 80 yards from scrimmage minimum. A lot of these games he's giving you at least 100. And some of these games he's giving you reduced numbers because he's resting in garbage time. We blew out the Saints, right? We blew out, who else was it? Washington. Blew out Arizona the second time. So everybody knows who's getting the ball, and very few teams were able to do much of anything to stop him. So it doesn't get a lot better than that, and he's, to me, the clear number one. He is the first, second, and third option in this passing attack. And there are other good players in this passing attack. You know, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, AJ Barner, Ken Walker on some level. They do good stuff too, but JSN being this good, this productive, this efficient with the limited opportunities that he gets to get the ball thrown his way. Like if this was a pass first offense, right? Like if you had, you know, you got teams like the Cardinals, the Bengals, the Cowboys, and the Broncos and Rams who throw the ball constantly. You put JSN in those offenses, he's probably pretty easily going past 2,000 yards because you throw the ball that much, you're just going to completely wreck the curve. So the fact that JSN's doing this for the Seattle offense that is run first, kind of inhuman. All right, so that's going to do it for our video, and that's going to do it for our little video series. So JSN is my MVP of the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. I don't know who else it could be. Again, I understand that some people might say, well, the defense was better than the offense. The defense was more important than the offense, but I think that's a little bit reductive. And I think that at the end of the day, JSN was so far and away the best and most important player on this offense that it overrides any of that kind of thinking. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go on out of here. We'll see if we got more to talk about later, but that wraps up this series. We're going to do at least one more other series in July. But that'll do it for now. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys feel differently. I don't think very many people will because, I mean, it's JSN we're talking about here. He shattered so many franchise records last season, and he did it with such style that hard for me to even contemplate anything else. But see you guys later. Everyone have a great rest of your day.